Hello, it's me, Mr. Nichols. Today, I'm going to be doing a very, very quick overview, and I hate that I have to do a quick overview of this because I'm not going to be in the classroom for the rest of the week, so it's going to be very fast. And my wife, it's right now 6. My wife needs me to pick up a curbside delivery at Walmart for her because she doesn't even get out of the house, and she's in a lot of pain, and she's called me and said that she's hurting too much to go get it. I'm going to be taking care of my wife for this whole week. So I've already done a lot of critical analysis video explanation. In fact, I've got the really long critical analysis video that I've got available this week. In fact, I'll show you where that is. But this does say here on the announcements that Nichols will be out, taking care of wife and kids at home. Post-childbirth complication popped up, and there's a lot of pain for my wife. And she was going to go pick up an order tonight, but she got her medication, and that's about all that she can handle. So she got her the stuff that she needed. So there'll be no physical class this week. Online work is still due, though. Lesson videos will be posted. I think there's going to be only this one. I'll be taking care of my wife, Tyler, and infant, because wife needs rest to relieve some pain related to childbirth. She did not want me to go into more specifics than that. And I will use the extra time from not being in the classroom to grade more if I can. So hopefully that'll somewhat make up for it. Because I know people want their grades back. But let's go into the class real quick, and I'll talk to you about what is up for this week. So week 7. This video will likely be here. I've got this optional tutorial over critical analysis where it's really long. It literally takes you through every step of the process. Only watch it, I think, if you're really not understanding. But that video will be available as the second video if you want to watch it. This one's going to be very short. I hate for this to be so short because there's so many race-related issues and stuff that we talk about this time. And I feel like they're very complex issues and not things that can be done quickly. But I don't know. Maybe I'll do a fuller video later. I'm not going to be happy with the length of this video, I'm going to tell you. It's going to feel like I'm doing something wrong. So, critical analysis due this Friday. There'll be a second poetry quiz over Chimney Super, Collins Incident, Harlem, Tiger, and Oakland to the South, which I'll be covering, not necessarily in that order. And then the readings for Dickinson will be due this week, so read Dickinson and then discuss Dickinson over the weekend. And then next week will be week 8, and then we'll talk about the research paper, I believe is when I'm assigning that. Yeah, so that's what's coming up. And then, I don't know, was there anything last week? We just talked about, yeah, we're good there. So, let's talk about these poems, which I believe I have pulled up in another window. I just haven't, yeah. Usually I would get rid of, in fact, I probably will still do this real quick. Okay. This is usually, I think, the order that I do it in. So let's do this real quick. I'm not going to read the N-word. I feel like a couple of years ago I might have done that, but I don't know. I used to feel like when an author wrote a certain thing, they wanted the people who read it to actually read that word. I've had some students tell me before that they think that I should read it. But at this point, I don't know. This year is so strange. We'll see how the dialogue changes in upcoming years. But given the nature of the 1619 Project and Black Lives Matter movement that's really been taking over this year, I don't want to say anything that I haven't fully taken care to see if it is something that should be read. I'm very much an advocate that I think personally that it should be read because that's how the author wrote it. And the discomfort that we feel is important to establishing meaning. But at the same time, I don't feel that's my place to do that if that's not what everybody feels. So I will just be reading Incident by Kenny Cullen, slightly edited. Let me see. Little kid, but he's talking from the future. Okay. Once riding in old Baltimore, head filled with glee, I saw a Baltimorean kept looking straight at me. Now I was 8 and very small, and he was no whit bigger, so I smiled. But he poked out his tongue and called me. I saw the whole Baltimore from May until December. Of all the things that happened there, that's all that I remember. In this case, it's called Incident, but it just goes to show how a lot of the feelings people are having lately are very, very valid, because it's important to remember what's going on in the Black Lives Matter movement right now, and the people who are saying, well, all lives matter. Duh. That's a statement that doesn't need to be made. the Black Lives Matter movement, and I'm not talking about some organization that takes funding. I'm not talking about that Black Lives Matter organization. I don't know what that is. I've never heard of that. But the idea that Black Lives Matter, maybe somebody turned it into an organization, maybe the origin of the phrase came from the organization. At this point, it doesn't really belong to the organization anymore. It belongs to the people. And the people are very angry that, what was that? I wrote a list of this stuff down the other day. So what they're saying essentially is that Black lives matter just as much as white lives, Hispanic lives, other types of lives, is what they're trying to say. And really just in general, the lives of Black people matter. And that the outsized killing of Black people by police is a problem that needs to be addressed in this country. That's all they're calling attention to. That is what it's all about, is saying that our people are being killed and we don't like that. People who look like me are dying in greater numbers. And that doesn't necessarily mean a larger total. Like, for example, if double the white people are being killed by police, and sometimes even in worse ways, that's not really the same, because you might have double the white people, but if white people constitute 4 times the population of Black people, then double the white people is not actually equal. You know, it should be 4 times the number of Black people, because there's 4 times the number of white people in general. So that's how that should work. But if you look at this, I mean, in terms of like ways that Black people's lives are different than white people's, even when controlling for socioeconomic status and nature of the alleged crime, a Black person is more likely to be arrested for a crime, less likely to post bail, more likely to receive a bail amount outside their income level, less likely to be released to their own recognizance outside of bail, more likely to be convicted of the same crime, more likely to take a plea deal, more likely to serve a longer sentence, etc., etc. All of these add up to having a much more difficult life, and that has been rolled into this idea of Black Lives Matter. So when he has an incident like this, we tend to think of he points out this incident, how this is the only thing he remembers from going to Baltimore. He spent a whole lot of time there. It was a lot of fun. But this one incident he had of racism is the only thing that he remembers while he was there. And many of us live in a life where we haven't had to endure that kind of either racism or discrimination. And regardless, I mean, we all have our own experiences with those things. So they should not make us where we think, well, that doesn't exist, or that what I have to deal with is worse. What we should do rather is say, well, I've dealt with something that is bad, and therefore I should acknowledge that other people also have to deal with bad things, and use that to increase our level of humanity and feelings of goodness toward others. And really watch out for the things that we say, because any negative impact that we have on somebody could last their entire lives. And I mean, we don't say these sorts of things anymore to people like this. There's some of our older member generation who probably think these sorts of things. But even the cruelty that he's endured from a child, and that child's probably learned that from their parent. Children aren't inherently racist. The impacts that we have go throughout generations. They aren't just once civil rights is passed, well, everything's equal. It's just not how that works. It takes a long time for things to make their way through generations. So that's all I can spend time on with incident. So now we're going to do open letter to the South. Okay, so this is Langston Hughes. This is a longer one that we're reading of his. Here we go. White workers of the South, miners, farmers, mechanics, mill hands, shop girls, railway men, servants, tobacco workers, sharecroppers, greetings. I'm the black worker. Listen, that the land might be ours, and the mines and the factories and the office towers at Harlan, Richmond, Gastonia, Atlanta, New Orleans, that the plants and the roads and the tools of power be ours. Let us forget what Booker T said, separate as the fingers. Let us become instead, you and I, one single hand, or I'm sorry, separate as the fingers. that can united rise to smash the old dead dogmas of the past, to kill the lies of color that keep the rich enthroned and drive us to the time clock and the plow, helpless, stupid, scattered, and alone, as now, race against race, because one is black, another white of face. Let us new lessons learn, all workers, new life ways make, one union form. Until the future burns out every past mistake, let us together say, you are my brother, black or white, you are my sister now, today. For me, no more the great migration to the north. Instead, migration into force and power, Tuskegee with a new flag on the tower. On every lynching tree, a poster crying free, because, oh poor white workers, you have linked your hands with me. We did not know that we were brothers, now we know. Out of that brotherhood let power grow. We did not know that we were strong, now we see in union lies our strength. Let unions be the force that breaks the time clock, smashes misery, takes land, takes factories, takes office towers, takes tools and banks and mines, railroads, ships and dams, until the forces of the world are ours. White worker, here is my hand. Today, we're man to man. And this idea that he says here is that, I mean, the analogy I love that I saw before was there's a plate of cookies on a table. And on that plate of cookies, there's 100 cookies. And doesn't have to be race people, but just for the sake of argument for what he's saying here, let's say we have a white corporation owner, a white wealthy person, and they take 99 cookies, okay? And basically they take the plate with the cookies on it, and they throw one cookie on the table, and he turns to the white guy there who says, as they're both looking at the cookie, him and the black guy, he says, are you going to let him take your cookie? And the white guy looks very mad at the black guy, and the black guy's like, that's my cookie. And the white guy says, that's my cookie. Meanwhile, the guy with the 99 cookies waltzes right out of the building. The problem is, that's not entirely accurate, because for the analogy to fully work, the plate of cookies would probably have to have about 99,999 cookies on it, and they're fighting over the one. Because wealth inequality in America is ridiculous. I believe the only place in the world where wealth inequality is so big, like it is here, is in Russia, I think. Maybe a couple of other places, but some of the biggest is in America and Russia. But like the poor here are really poor, and the rich are super rich. And what he's saying here is that the poor spend all this time fighting each other, when the only reason their lives are hard at all is because somebody at the top is taking more from them. That's essentially the argument that he's making. He's saying that whites and blacks should be together because the difficulties that they endure are not because of each other. And that's what he's basically saying here. He's like, it almost seems like racism only exists because people need for whites and blacks not to work together. That's what it seems like he's saying here. Now I got to do Chimney Sweeper. When my mother died, I was very young. So this is the one I think I assigned, Chimney Sweeper. Hopefully this is the one you read. And it goes, when my mother died, I was very young, and my father sold me while yet my tongue could scarcely cry, weep, 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 weep. See at chimneys I sweep, and in soot I sleep. There's little Tom Dacker, who cried when his head curled like a lambback's who shaved, so I said, hush, Tom, never mind it, for when your head's bare, you know the soot cannot spoil your white hair. And so he was quiet, and that very night, as Tom was a-sleeping, he had such a sight that thousands of sweepers, Dick, Joe, Ned, and Jack, were all of them locked up in coffins of black. And by came an angel who had a bright key, and he opened the coffins and set them all free. Then down a green plain, leaping, laughing, they run and wash in a river and shine in the sun. Then naked and white, all their bags left behind, they rise upon clouds and sport in the wind. And the angel told Tom if he'd be a good boy, he'd have God for his father and never want joy. And so Tom awoke, and we rose in the dark and got with our bags and our brushes to work. Though the morning was cold, Tom was happy and warm. So if all do their duty, they need not fear harm. And a lot of times I have students who write discussion posts, probably you did this time, I haven't had a chance to take a look at them yet, but probably you did this time where you said, see, it just goes to show that, if you have a hard life, you pray to God and you do his will, then things will work out for you. So it's a good thing. And what this comes from, the William Blake, who also wrote The Tiger from this week, he wrote this poem and published it in a collection called Songs of Innocence. So this is the kind of idea that somebody might have who is innocent. However, I think it's very important when talking about this poem, before we even say a word about it, to point out he had another poem called Songs of Experience that came out later, also called Chimney Sweeper. And it starts out like this, very short. It says, "A little black thing among the snow, crying, weep, weep, in notes of woe. Where are thy father and mother, say? They are gone up, that's right. They are both gone up to the church to pray. Because I was happy upon the heath and smiled among the winter's clothes, they clothed me in the clothes of death and taught me to sing the notes of woe. And because I am happy and dance and sing, they think they have done me no injury, and are gone to praise God and his priest and king who make up a heaven of our misery." Well, like that sounds really dark compared to the other one. The other one's all happy. Oh, you'll go to heaven one day and it'll be nice and all your struggles will be over. But he's essentially implying here that those who go to church, seemingly then, I don't know about now, but the people who are rich end up going to church and praying for thanks, who sometimes can afford to spend time going to church or building ornate churches because they are making their riches off the backs of poor people. And in some cases, children like this, where it says, "Where are your father and mother gone?" And it says that they had a happy little boy, and what they did was they sold him into slavery as a chimney sweeper. And now they've got money that they use to go to church and live in high society, whereas he's working as a chimney sweeper somewhere and, essentially dying. Like, I don't know how anybody can sell their kid like this. Like, I just don't get it. Like, and I hear too that, like, sex trafficking, when people talk about it being a problem, but it actually is really a much worse problem. Sexual abuse within households. Family members are the biggest perpetrator of sexual abuse amongst children. And this isn't even sex abuse. This is just selling your kid and working them to death, which is really wrong. But, sexual abuse, too, is another way of taking what you need out of your kid. And I don't know. I don't understand people do this to their children. I just don't get it. I don't get how this sort of thing still happens today. Like, it really bothers me, and, like, just makes me want to cry thinking that people have done this kind of thing to their children. To any children, really. Like, it just is awful. And people like to pretend like it's strangers, but the people who are doing it live here, and they're right under our noses, and we don't notice. But we act like it's always another. It's somebody on the outside, and it keeps us from noticing the markers that happen in the world all around us. It's a big problem. Taking taking advantage of children, especially within families. It's also a problem, I think, in the foster care system. They have ways of catching that sort of stuff, but they're not perfect. The best you can do is try to reduce it, it seems. The families, though, it's even harder because there's not like constant people coming to your house and checking on the house. But I'm already getting really far along in the time, and I've got to get that thing baked up for my wife. So, it's just the Songs of Experience says that sometimes even in the name of God, people do horrible things. And it's just awful. And people will take advantage of the most innocent people. And Blake really had a problem with that. He didn't understand why evil was so prevalent in a Christian world. He didn't really understand how that could be the case. And so he oftentimes blamed Christianity. He's like, if we're told that God is ultimate good, but he's aware of all this stuff, how do I deal with that? In fact, I might skip over to one that we usually do last because it sort of wraps up everything. Actually, let's look at this other one. Nah, let's do it. So, tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night, what a mortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? And what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes, and what wings dare he aspire, what the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain, and what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dread grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tiger, tiger burning bright in the forest of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? So here, I don't know if the very, very important word to the poem is the word lamb. In fact, there aren't a whole lot of words that completely and totally unlock a poem, but that's one that sort of does it here. Because you might be wondering, is this a poem about a tiger? Tigers are very dangerous, they're very vicious, and he's asking, like, what immortal hand or eye, and who's immortal? God, Satan maybe, but for sure God. Dare frame thy fearful symmetry. Could frame is what the first stanza says. So who could make you, essentially? Who could make something so terrifying? And so basically it's a poem about the slow making, almost like a metalsmith. What do you call those guys? I don't know why I can't think of the word right now. They heat up the metal and they swing the hammers. I don't know why I can't think of the term, but it's on Skyrim and you go to them and like the hammer, anvil, that kind of stuff, and then they metalworking. I don't know. Crafting? No, that's different. That's just crafting. So workbench. Anyways, he's essentially asking, how could somebody build this tiger on purpose, knowing that it's vicious? And I think the implication here, too, is that it's attractive. Tigers are very beautiful. Like, a kid would want to pet them. But they're terrifying. And they're vicious, and they can tear things apart. So, it says, when the stars stood on their spears and watered heaven with their tears. Why would that happen? What are the stars, and why are they throwing down their spears, watering heaven with their tears? Why do they seem to be giving up and getting upset? Did he smile his work to see? The one who's the immortal who made the tiger. And then it says, he who made the lamb make thee. The lamb, there's only one big person that we call the lamb. The lamb is Jesus. So when you capitalize lamb like that, who is the lamb? Not a lamb, but the lamb. Jesus is considered the lamb. So did the same person who made the Jesus make the tiger, make the devil? I think is the implication here. And think about the devil. He is like a tiger, right? He's vicious. He's horrible, yet really attractive. I mean, the things that are sinful in the traditional terms are the fun things, right? They're the things that are enjoyable, the things that you want to do, the things that are very attractive. So the idea here is that if Satan exists and God has ultimate power, then God is somehow able to squash that out if he wanted to. If he's not able to, and he's not all-powerful. So he's wondering, like, how do these churches exist when people go to them who sell their kids into slavery? And how can God be good if that's the case? How can a good God exist, a purely good God exist, when all these horrible things happen? Is life just more interesting and have more meaning with evil in the world? Like, if everything were happy, evil without evil, would it not be that interesting? I mean, do we have to have evil in order to appreciate good? Are the bad things that happen necessary? Is Judas, the one who gave up Jesus, not really that bad? Because if Judas hadn't done what he did to Jesus, Jesus never would have had a chance to sacrifice himself, and thereby Christianity would not be born. I don't know. See, it's one of those things where it raises a ton of interesting questions, but regardless, whoever's dealing with these problems, the issues of evil, deals with the situation in, no, that's not what I meant, Harlem. So he asks a question, and it's more general, and it's less specifically race-related, but it's there. He says, what happens to a dream deferred? So when you have to put off your dreams, does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? So, sometimes you have like a grape that slowly turns into a raisin, but then if you have a raisin, it's also in the sun, it just dries up. Or does it fester like a sore and then run? So when you put off a dream, does it make it like a sore, like eventually like start to fill with pus and just ooze out? It's gross. Does it stink like rotten meat so you can tell it's from far away and you stay away from it and just you don't even want to be near it? Or does it crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? You know, like almost like I think of like a creme brulee or something. Isn't that the one that has like the crust on top and you pop it and there's like pudding inside? I don't know. I'm not really a chef person. It says maybe it just sags under a heavy load. Too long dealing with deferring your dreams. It's just like a heavy load. So, you know, you work all your life so you can someday move up, but you never move up. You just defer that dream. You keep putting off, like, say, college because you keep having kids. And you're like, oh, I'll go someday. And all the kids are gone, and at 65 years old, you finally go to college, and something else happens, and you can't go to college. And he says, or does it explode? And I think the implication here, because it's Langston Hughes, and because the poem is called Harlem, which is sometimes mistakenly called a dream deferred, so people who are stuck, not necessarily stuck in Harlem, like Harlem's a bad place, but people who are in poverty and get stuck, people who are, you know, black and not allowed to have a command of the resources and just freedoms in the way that, you know, white people in America do, what happens to the dreams that they'll have to defer? Does it do like these various things, or does it just explode? And I think we've seen in the Black Lives Matter protests that in some senses, I mean, right now things have not exploded. We've had protests happen, right? So we have George Floyd, we have Jacob Blake, Breonna Taylor are the ones this year that we all know of. These are all people, and it's been happening since Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown, I think. It's been happening even longer before that. Emmett Till. This has been going on a long time. So what happens is that happens more and more and more, and black people put off their dreams of being treated as equals and not having to worry when they walk out of their house. At some point, does that dream just explode? And protests, I'm sorry, but protests are not an explosion. Protests are a peaceful freedom of speech expression. But what happens if you continually do a freedom of speech expression and you keep trying to say something about it and things only get worse? At what point does it explode? And I think Langston Hughes is asking us that question. How long can people endure evil and continually let it without turning evil in turn to get rid of evil? Because, you know, you've heard before, sometimes you have to fight fire with fire, right? It almost sounds as though he's saying a dream deferred can then explode. It can become like fire. It can become incendiary. And you don't want people to get to a point where they become incendiary around other people. But sometimes people feel forced into being incendiary because their dreams get deferred for so long they can't take it anymore. Look at Battle Royal. Look at the grandpa. He's laying there on his deathbed. He said, fight the good fight. You know, kill him with kindness kind of thing. And his son's just like, what? But how long do you have to put that kind of thing off? And how could, you know, people act like, oh, these things are better than they used to be. Shouldn't they just be equal? Completely equal? And I'm not talking like, I mean, literally, like if you were to take a random sampling of every single race, culture, America, there will be equal treatment in all areas. Because there's no reason there shouldn't be equal treatment in all areas. I don't care if America is 90% white, 10% black. All people should be treated equally. And they should have, you look at all the numbers and you say, oh, look, they're no more likely to be arrested. They're no more likely to be, I mean, I just don't see how these things aren't considered standard. People try to make excuses for why there seems to be special treatment. Like, just acknowledge that it's there and just move on from that. Like, I just don't understand people don't get that. People don't want to feel like bad people. It doesn't make you a bad person to acknowledge that there are problems in society. It just makes you realistic. Not everything that somebody says is bad is about you. I just don't get that. Probably people can complain about this. I don't really care. I'm in a hurry, so I'm having to speak off the cuff a little more than I would want to. But that's the poems for the week, and I went through them fairly quickly. If you have any questions or concerns or complaints, please direct them my way. I promise I'm a better teacher in a regular semester. I promise this. Blame it on the pandemic or the people who let the pandemic get out of hand, up to you. So, Don't forget to go out and vote. Early voting is this week still, I believe. And then we have November 3rd is coming up. You can vote on general election day if you really want to, but early voting is where it's at, y'all. Like, it's awesome. There's less people there. I mean, there's still pretty long lines, but still there's a lot less people than general. Bye. Wish me luck. Helping my wife out.